Here's Brody Brazil.
They say time flies when you're having a good time. I would tend to agree with that. Like, for example, I can't even believe it's been 13 years now I've been covering the Sharks and the NHL here at the TV network. But in that span, there's two common compliments I hear from sports fans about the game of hockey. Number one, they love it because it's fast and it's physical, and some fans actually get into the fighting aspect of it. And the other thing I hear as a compliment is the players are down to earth, they're relatable, fans seem to associate with the hockey culture. Like, they really admire the fact that, you know, these professional athletes don't come with the high maintenance tag that other maybe professional athletes in different sports do. But I'm a little bit worried, to be honest, that those things are actually contributing to a bigger, broader, and underlying problem that not a lot of people are talking about until now. I saw this pop up on my feed the other day. It's an article from the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and it just really hits with me. It resonates with me. It's something I think I've been observing this last decade plus, these last dozen plus years in covering the NHL pretty close. The title is this: Culture of Silence in Men's Hockey is Threatening Players' Mental Health, a study finds. In-depth interviews found that job security and judgment from those around them fuels professional players' silence. By the way, this article also even comes with a warning that things might get a little bit graphic in the contents. A new study from a group of University of British Columbia researchers takes a deep dive into the pressures professional men's hockey players feel to stay silent despite serious personal problems. The study, published last month in the journal Qualitative Research in Sport, Exercise, and Health, involved in-depth interviews with 19 men who are current or former pro hockey players. All but one had played in the National Hockey League. Through those interviews, lead author Katie Crawford and her team discovered despite facing issues like physical pain, mental unwellness, concussions, addictions, relationship difficulties, and more, many players felt pressured to keep things to themselves and deal with problems on their own. Quote, what I saw was a lot of different barriers, things like fear of job security, fear of losing your position on a team, judgment from teammates, judgment from coaches, judges from the general public, from fans, end quote, said Crawford. While there has been work in recent years to break down these barriers in the NHL, she said, more needs to be done. Crawford said some players knew there are resources available to them provided by the team, like counselors, but many are distrustful. Since those resources are provided by their team, their employer, there are concerns about the confidentiality and independence of those resources. Some players worry reaching out for help in confidence could be used against them if management finds out. Quote, the assurance to them around the confidentiality isn't concrete, end quote, Crawford said. All of a sudden, great, we have the resource, but no one is willing to use it out of fear, end quote. She said her findings show a need for the NHL to establish a baseline of resources all teams must provide to their players when it comes to off-ice supports and enshrine the independence of those supports. CBC asked the NHL and the Players Union, the NHLPA, for comment on this story, but they did not immediately hear back. Crawford wrote this study as part of her master's program in kinesiology, but is now a PhD candidate in health at the University of Bath in the United Kingdom. She's an athlete herself, having played volleyball at UBC, and comes from a hockey family, which helped drive her interest in this topic. Her uncles are hockey scouts, her brother is an NHL video coach, and her father is former Canucks coach Mark Crawford. Crawford once coached Rick Rippon, who, as you probably know, died by suicide in 2011. She said Rippon's death had a big impact on her family. Quote, I remember my dad being really kind of shaken by it, end quote, she said, adding that she remembers feeling like these guys were a little bit kind of closed off and hardened and just really wondering what it was making it so difficult for them to be more open and more expressive. Crawford said for ethical reasons, none of the players interviewed for her study were coached by her father. She said while men who play pro hockey are a very specialized population, mental health in the workplace is a bigger issue, and employers' approach matters for employees' performance and well-being. I think the closing comment here is just that in professional sports, we worry so much about the physical health of athletes, down to the smallest detail. If it's not right, we'll get it looked at, we'll get it treated, we'll do rehabilitation, whatever it takes. But when it comes to the mental side of it, there is still a huge stigma. And also, let's be real honest, sometimes the physical part of injury translates into the mental health side of things. These are independent in conversation, but they're very well connected when it comes to performance and when your job is to be a competitive professional athlete. I obviously think hockey can do more here. I think players can do more. They can be a little bit more open. And I realize that's the culture problem, though. The culture is a player won't even reveal an injury they have because they don't want to upset the team or let anybody down. They don't talk about the ankle, the hip, the knee, the broken finger, the dislocated shoulder, any of that that's been ailing them all season long. And then they'll get criticized by fans. Why aren't you performing? Where have the goals been this year? Well, if you knew the real story half the time, you would understand just how physically beat up these young men are. And a lot of times that translates to the mental side. So, you know what? I'm glad that something like this is being discussed. But quite honestly, it needs to now go from more than just a discussion. It needs to turn into actual action.